The blizzard outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vane estate was a chaotic swirl of white, but inside, everything was curated perfection. It was January 15th, the unofficial start of the Valentine's season for the ultra-wealthy. Silas Vane, a man whose face was the cover of every tech magazine from New York to Tokyo, stepped into his foyer. His boots, worth more than a mid-sized car, left wet imprints on the heated Italian marble. He had cut his London trip short. He wanted to surprise his wife, Ivy. He had a rare pink diamond in his pocket and a plan to be a better man. A man who wasn't just a shadow in his own home, Ivy? He called out. His voice echoed against the vaulted ceilings. The house was too quiet. The usual hum of the smart home system felt off. Suddenly, the shadows near the grand staircase shifted. A figure lunged at him. Before Silas could react, a small, calloused hand clamped over his mouth with bruising force. He was shoved backward, his body slamming into the oak-paneled walls of a narrow coat closet. "Do not make a sound," a woman's voice hissed. It was a voice he recognized, but had never truly listened to. It was Elena, the housekeeper who had worked for him for 3 years. She was an immigrant from a small village in the Andes, a woman Silas had always treated like a background character in his life. "Elena, what the hell?" "Quiet," she whispered, her eyes burning with a desperate intensity. She pressed her body against the door, peeking through the thin, decorative slit. Through that crack, Silas saw his world shatter. His wife, Ivy, walked into the foyer wearing a red silk gown. Following her was Silas's younger brother, Julian. They weren't looking for Silas, they were laughing. "He'll be back on the 14th, Julian said, his voice slick with greed. The final dose should be in his system by then. A romantic Valentine's dinner, a sudden heart failure. The perfect tragedy. Ivy ran a hand down Julian's arm. The doctor in Zurich was right. The dizzy spells, the fatigue he'd blamed. On the London time zone, it was a death sentence delivered in his morning coffee. Elena pulled Silas deeper into the dark as the couple moved toward the dining room. When she finally released her hand, Silas slumped against a row of heavy fur coats. "You knew," he whispered, his voice cracking. Elena straightened her apron, her face hardening. "I am the one who cleans your glass, Mr. Silas. I see the powder at the bottom. I am the one who finds the empty vials in the trash. I tried to tell you last month, but you were too busy to look at a maid." The sting in her words was sharper than the betrayal. Silas looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She wasn't just staff. She was a woman who had been watching his slow execution, while he was busy counting his billions. "We have to call the police," Silas said, reaching for his encrypted phone. Elena swiped it out of his hand with the speed of a cobra. "No, you think your brother is a fool? He pays the security firm. He pays the local sheriff. If you make a call, they will know you are in this house before you hit send. In my country, when the lions are hunting, you do not roar. You hide. I am not a coward, Elena." "No," she snapped. "You are a target, and right now, you are a very stupid one. Follow me, use the service stairs. If they find you now, you won't live to see the sunrise." They descended into the servants' tunnels, a network of narrow, concrete hallways that ran beneath the luxury of the mansion. Silas felt like a stranger in his own home. He had paid for every brick, yet he didn't know where these stairs led. "The snow is too deep for a car," Elena whispered as they reached the basement laundry room. "But the delivery truck for the linens is coming at midnight." "We get in the back. I have a fleet of SUVs in the garage," Silas protested. "GPS tracked," Elena countered. The moment an engine starts, Julian's phone rings. "You want to be a billionaire, or you want to be alive?" Silas gritted his teeth. "Lead the way." They huddled behind a stack of industrial washers. The smell of bleach and cheap detergent was overwhelming. Silas watched Elena. She was calm, her movements precise. She had spent a lifetime being overlooked, and now that invisibility was their only weapon. "Why help me?" Silas asked. "I've been a ghost to you." Elena didn't look at him. She checked her watch. "Because I know what it is like to have your life stolen by people who think they are gods. My brother died in a mine because a man like Julian wanted to save a few dollars on safety gear. I couldn't save him. I can save you." The linen truck was a freezing metal box. Silas and Elena huddled together for warmth as the truck bounced down the mountain pass. Hours later, They hopped out in a desolate industrial district on the outskirts of Denver. The setting was a graveyard for cars. Twisted metal, rusted skeletons of buses, and the smell of oil and rot. "What are we doing here?" Silas asked, his breath hitching in the sub-zero air. "Ending your life," Elena said. She led him to a man sitting in a shack, a man with a glass eye and a scarred throat. "Give him your phone." "And your watch," Elena commanded. "This watch was my father's." "It has a cellular chip," Elena snapped. "If you keep it, they find us in 10 minutes. Choose." Silas handed over the $50,000 timepiece and his phone. The man in the shack didn't blink. He tossed them into a massive industrial shredder. The sound of grinding metal echoed through the yard. "Now," Elena said, her voice softening just a fraction. "The digital trail ends here. To the world, Silas Vane disappeared in a scrapyard. Now we find the truth." Elena didn't take him to a hotel. She took him to a neighborhood where the streetlights were broken and the signs were in Spanish. They climbed 3 flights of stairs to a cramped apartment. The air inside was thick with the scent of cilantro, roasted chilies, and a cheap radiator that clanked like a heartbeat. "Mateo!" Elena called out. A young man with thick glasses and a lab coat over his sweatshirt emerged. "Elena, who is this?" "This is the man I told you about. He has the sickness." Mateo looked at Silas with a mixture of pity and professional curiosity. "The digitalis. Elena brought me a sample of the wine last week. It is a slow-kill formula. Very clever, very cruel." Silas sat on a sofa covered in plastic. On the wall was a small, colorful altar for the Day of the Dead. He felt the irony. He was a man who lived for the future, sitting in a room that honored the past. "I need to prove it," Silas said. "I need more than a wine sample. I need the files. I have a hidden server in my study. It's an air-gapped system. It records the internal security feeds that Julian doesn't have access to." "Then we have to go back," Mateo said. "But look at you. You can barely stand." "I'll stand," Silas growled, the fire of his old self returning. "I'll stand long enough to see them burn." The next few days were a blur of recovery and planning. Elena cared for him with a blunt, no-nonsense efficiency. She forced him to eat spicy broth that cleared his head and tea, that settled his heart. One night, as the snow tapped against the window, Silas watched her. "You're a doctor, aren't you?" he asked. Elena paused, a wet cloth in her hand. "I was in my country. Here, I am the woman who scrubs your toilets. It is easier for your people to see a mop than a degree." The shame Silas felt was a physical weight. "I'm sorry, Elena, for everything." "Don't be sorry," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Be ready. Valentine's Day is 3 days away. Ivy has announced a gala for heart health in your honor. She's going to announce your death to the world while wearing $1 million in jewelry. Then we'll give her a show they'll never forget." Returning to the estate was like entering a lion's den. They used Elena's knowledge of the service entries. Silas was dressed in a standard maintenance uniform, his face obscured by a cap and a mask. They reached the study. Silas moved to the fireplace, pulling a hidden lever behind a brick. The wall slid back to reveal a glowing server rack. His fingers flew across the keys. "I have it," he whispered. "Video of her mixing the powder. Audio of them laughing about my funeral." Suddenly, the lights in the study flicked on. "I knew the maid was too smart for her own good," Julian's voice boomed. He was standing in the doorway holding a silenced pistol. Behind him, Ivy looked on, her eyes cold and bored. "Silas, you should have just died in the snow," Ivy said, checking her manicure. "It would have been so much cleaner. You killed our father for the inheritance." "Julian," Silas said, stepping out of the shadows, "I always wondered why his heart gave out so fast." "You used the same trick on him, didn't you?" Julian's hand shook. "He was holding us back. Just like you. The difference is," Silas said, glancing at the server, "I'm a tech mogul. The moment I logged in, this footage started live streaming to the federal authorities. Look at your phone, Julian." The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, echoing off the mountain peaks. Julian panicked, aiming the gun at Silas, but Elena didn't hesitate. She swung a heavy brass bust from the desk, slamming it into Julian's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. "In my village," Elena hissed, pinning Julian's arm behind his back. "We don't wait for the police to deal with rabid dogs." Ivy tried to run, but Silas blocked the door. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her with a profound sense of disgust. "Happy Valentine's Day, Ivy. I hope you like the color red. It's all you'll see in a prison cell. The feds swarmed the house minutes later. The beautiful monster and the greedy brother were led away in cuffs, their faces captured by the very security cameras they thought they controlled. The gala went on, but not as Ivy planned. Silas stood on the stage, not as a victim, but as a survivor. He didn't talk about tech or billions. He talked about the people we ignore. We live in a world where we look at the stars and forget the ground we stand on. Silas told the stunned crowd. I was saved by a woman whose name I barely knew, even though she saved my life every day for 3 years. He looked into the wings where Elena stood, looking uncomfortable in the spotlight. I am stepping down as CEO, Silas announced, and I am turning this estate into a center for displaced professionals, doctors, lawyers, and scientists who come to this country and are forced to be invisible. Silas and Elena are back at the small apartment in Denver. The mansion is gone. The billions are being funneled into the foundation. Silas is in the kitchen, clumsily trying to chop vegetables. Elena watches him, her arms crossed. You are terrible at that, she says, her sharp tongue still as lethal as ever. I'm learning, Silas smiles. Good, she says, taking the knife from him. Because tomorrow we start the real work. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that the most dangerous traps are often set by those we love, and our greatest saviors are often those we refuse to see. Wealth can build a house, but only integrity can build a home. What would you do if you realized your partner was your greatest enemy? Would you have the courage to trust someone you've ignored for years? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share where you are watching from. And remember, look at the people around you today. You never know who might be holding the key to your survival.